Namaste, and welcome to this evening's webinar on Living Wisely, Living Well. And let's begin with the prayer, and then we'll have a little chant, and then we'll begin our discourse. And maybe in the middle there, we'll spend just a few moments meditating and collecting ourselves. Let's begin. O Infinite Spirit, may thy light of wisdom, of truth, shine within us, and may we be able to share that truth, that light, with all whom we meet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So let's begin. Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhu Chasaka Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mamadeva Deva Tvameva Mata Chapita Let's now, before we begin our discussion this evening, let's sit upright, spine straight and erect. Let's inhale, take a deep breath, hold the breath for a moment. Now slowly exhale, letting go of all tension. Once more, let's inhale, tense the body. Now throw the breath out. Let's relax and close our eyes and gently look upward toward the point between the eyebrows. And there, imagine a light, or visualize a light. Look into the light and draw that light down into our consciousness, filling the body, driving away all darkness. And feel that light radiating out, sharing it with others. Om Shanti, Shanti. For those of you who perhaps are joining us for first time, second time, and I haven't had a chance to greet you. My name is Nayaswami Jaya, and every Wednesday evening we do this webinar on Living Wisely, Living Well. On the topic of the day, for each day there's a daily reading by Swami Ananda, and we discuss that. And today we're beginning February, first day of February, and the reading for today is, if someone challenges something you are doing that seems to you right and good, meet that challenge vigorously. Try never to hurt anyone, however. Be always calm in your heart. Remember, nothing and no one can touch who you really are in your inner self. Swami was always very vigorous, as he said, defend vigorously. If you're doing something good, be willing to stand up for it. Be willing to affirm it, and be willing, even if called upon and it's appropriate, to be able to share that. And he would sometimes tell the story of one of the other disciples in the ashram with Paramahansa Yogananda when he was a young man living there with the Master. He would say there was this one woman in the ashram who Master criticized because she was so passive in not willing to stand up for her teaching, stand up for her guru, stand up for the principles that they were living there. And he said to her, Master said to the woman, he says, if someone were to come up to you and say that, oh, last night I saw your guru walking downtown drunk on the street, he says, you wouldn't say anything. You might just say something like, oh, that's interesting. But you wouldn't, he says, I expect you to defend and to counter that with the truth. You know that wouldn't be true, so why wouldn't you say something about it? And this is the attitude that he felt that if we have something good and where there's high principles at stake and you're challenged that way and you see obvious falsehood, he says, stand up for it. Be willing to defend that which is true. And Swami Kriyananda, of course, embodied that principle. He wasn't one to stand idly aside. There's a story also of, even as a young man, when he was a disciple there in the ashram at Self-Realization Fellowship, he went to a lecture, and I believe it was Master was speaking at the lecture. I'm not exactly sure that, but certainly somebody was representing Master's teachings if it wasn't him. And they were speaking about it, and he was in the audience, and there were other devotees of Self-Realization Fellowship in the audience also, but right behind him, there were two women right behind him, and they were kibitzing, you might say, or speaking about what was being presented. Let's say it was Master presenting it. He was presenting these teachings, and they were criticizing and exchanging falsehoods about what was being presented, and it was negative. And because Swamiji was right in front of them, he could hear what they were saying. And so he didn't say anything, right? He didn't interrupt and say anything at that point. But then at the intermission, or perhaps at the conclusion of the program, he went out into the lobby and he sought out those two women. And he says, there were other people there of devotees in the audience, and nobody said anything. He says, but he wasn't going to let it stand. So he sought out the two women, but he did confront them hostilely. But he did confront them. And he says, I was there sitting in front of you, and I heard what you had to say. And I'd just like you to know the truth of the matter. And he began to share these of what Master was, what these teachings were, and he didn't do it confrontationally, you see, but he said he wouldn't let it pass and let this air, which he had perceived, he wouldn't let that air stand, that darkness stand. He wanted to counter it with light. And that's how Swami taught us. He said, he wrote a song, he says, brave were the warriors who lived in these hills, brave they conquered the foe, to defend what is holy, to defend what is true. Our Lord on mankind did this duty bestow. That was the lyrics from a song that he wrote. He said to defend what is holy, to defend what is true, but to do it in a way that doesn't cause damage to another person, do it in a way that's not going to be hurtful to another person, but yet in a spirit of elevating that other person, letting clarity confront unclarity, let light confront darkness. Don't let the darkness stand in that way. Now, Swamiji would of course direct his comments to people you might say, people who had an overly passive nature, especially, he would direct those to. There are some people that are very aggressive and don't need to be, perhaps they need to be restrained a little bit, and of course he would do that too if he saw that nature in people. But nevertheless, just generally the principle of it was, he said, be willing to stand up for what is true. And not only just be willing to stand up, but to also be willing to share. If you're doing something good, why not share it with other people? There was a story in Master's life that was a little bit funny, is that Master was with a group of nuns, And they were in a city, I'm not quite sure, it may have been San Francisco, but they were in the middle of the city, and he asked them, he says, let's do the energization exercises. And there was a very, very public place. And these nuns were shy. They thought, oh gosh, everybody's going to look at us, and they didn't want to be on display. Imagine, out in the middle of the public. But nevertheless, Master had them doing the energization exercises, and people would look, but he said, why be ashamed of doing something that's good? Maybe people might actually be interested. They might, and this actually is the case. Sometimes people will come and say, what is it you're doing? Oh, that's interesting. Would you show me? Rather than feeling a necessity to hide what you're doing from other people. If it's a good thing, why not share it? And of course, when you look, if somebody confronts you, if you're not willing to stand up for something that you feel is true and honest, what would you stand up for? Don't be passive. Let's imagine that you were walking down the street with a friend, and somebody came out and started attacking your friend. Wouldn't you defend your friend? Help your friend out? It's the same way. If somebody's attacking something that's very dear to you, a truth, a principle, it's not that you're defending yourself personally, because sometimes take the personality of out of it. Take yourself out of it. It's not that you're defending yourself. Sometimes we have to allow life. Sometimes it's best just to let life, take its course. What happens, happens. But you're not defending yourself. You're defending your friend, or in this case, you're defending the principle. You're defending truth. So it's an impersonalness there to it, because merely to defend yourself, sometimes what you become is you become defensive. And so let's look at what Swami says here. He says, be willing to defend that which is true, your beliefs, true beliefs. To defend something is not to be defensive. It's just, the difference between those two. You're a little bit impersonal. To be defensive is to be emotionally attached to something, to be reactive to something. Oh, your emotions get stirred up, your feelings get stirred up, and in that way you then become reactive, and you're reacting to something from that emotional responsiveness. And that's not what we're saying. We're saying no, to be calm, to be collected, but yet to be willing to stand up for truth, and to be able to, if you see another person who's perhaps attacking your beliefs, and remember in this reading what Swami says, if somebody confronts you, be willing to stand up for it, but in a calm, dispassionate attitude, wanting to help the other person who's confronting you see the light. If there's an emotional defensiveness, oftentimes what that indicates is a certain insecurity. People who get you confront somebody, they're in error. You feel they're in error, and if you notice, if you tell somebody, you confront somebody, or you mention something to somebody, they're in error. If they get all upset about it, you know that they're being defensive, that there's some insecurity there. But if that person reacts in a way that, no, they're calm, they're peaceful, and they just are setting you straight, because you're the one that's confronting them, then you're more likely to say, oh, what does this person have to say? They're not being reactive to what I'm saying. So if somebody confronts you, you see, you don't need to go out and look for confrontation, because we're, you might say, confronted by the world every day. There's every moment, there's air. We live in the world where people have, it's a certain darkness there, that people's beliefs are often incorrect. But we don't need to go out in every instance try to set people straight about what they're doing. I remember when I was in college, there was my university there, the public university was there. It would then, the property of the university would end, and then there was a street, and then the sidewalk there on the street, that was public space. And so there would often be people who would speak there. They'd set up a box, and they'd get on the box, and they would give their discourse, you might say, to the public. And this, because it was public property, they were free, and there was a right to do that. And there was one gentleman who would almost every day, when I would go home, be walking home, he would be there on his box, and he would be proselytizing. He would be giving a lecture, a sermon on Jesus Christ. I think he was a very fundamentalist Christian. He was be giving a sermon, which that was okay. I didn't mind that so much, but he was very confrontational, and he would see somebody like me coming by, a college student with his books, and he would start, you might say, confronting me. Now, I didn't care. I wasn't one way or the other about it, but he would be very confrontational that way, and I would say something to him, say, "How are you doing today?" And he would be talking things that I didn't agree with at all, although I wasn't a follower of these teachings at that time, but he was so fundamentalist that I couldn't help but respond, and he would always then confront me even further, and he would end his, when I said something that was counter to his opinion, say, "Bless your dirty little heart." And I realized, you see, there was no reason for me to be confronting him and talking to him, because it was going to have absolutely no impact. And so I would just go by and I would just salute him on the way out, and "Bless your dirty little heart." And he would say to me, well, it's like that. We don't need to go looking for challenges, because there's infinite numbers of them. But more here, what Swami's saying is when somebody confronts us, you see, confronts us. And of course, we have to remember the other advice here is in sharing what we have, we've been confronted, we want to share and clarify, we have to think in terms of the other person's welfare as well. We're trying to help that other person, really. We're trying to bring light. It's not personal. We're trying to bring light and clarity into the world. And so there should, if you ever feel in that reaction of trying to be helpful, to bring clarity, if you feel a sense of emotionalism, there's a certain amount of, you want to eliminate the desire to hurt anybody else. That's what Swami says here. Don't try to hurt anybody. And obviously, I don't mean that physically, although it could apply if your nature is that way. But I mean emotionally, trying to put the other person down, trying to silence that other person. We don't want to do that. And this is because you could say that then we're foisting our beliefs upon that other person. So we don't need to proselytize. We don't need to hurt anybody else. And actually, speaking of proselytizing other people, Master said, Paramahansa Yogananda, I mean when I say Master, he said, it's a spiritual sin, actually, to destroy the faith of another person. And so this is one reason also why we should vigorously defend if we feel something is right, because that person is actually, it's a sinful behavior to try, and for anybody to try to destroy our faith. But in the same way, we have to be careful to destroy, we see ignorance in another person, to go out and try to destroy that person's faith is also a spiritual sin. Oftentimes we see, so you could say that preacher that was confronting me, I tried to, before I learned better, that it was useless, I would try to say, no, this is, try to shed some light in his world. But for me to have taken it to the point of trying to destroy his faith, that would have been wrong, because he was at a personal level where he needed to strongly affirm his beliefs. Now, he was using me as his sounding board, or he was using me as his audience and others, but really, he was probably talking to himself. Mm-hmm. He was needing to affirm that strongly to others in order to reinforce that within himself. And in the same way, I believe we need to speak up when confronted, not for his sake, in this case the fellow on his box, not for his sake, but for my sake. I need to do it for my own sake, to speak up for what I believe, because it strengthens me, It gives me firm resolve. It affirms a principle that I stand for truth. I'm loyal to higher principles. And in the doing of that, rather than allowing myself to be too passive and to just allow negativity and falsehood to stand without saying something, inwardly I may be allowing that to happen, and that's not good for me. I need to be affirmative of what I believe in and be able to confront that, confront the foe, confront ignorance. Now, in doing that, what happens is it forces me to introspect. Do I really believe what I'm saying? How true, how much am I really understanding? Can I defend what I believe in? Do I understand it well enough? Oftentimes you'll find that people are very dogmatic about something when they don't have a clear understanding about it. They go hand in hand. High dogmatism goes to a lack, it sort of corresponds to a lack of an ability to prove what you're asserting. And so consequently, we might introspect within ourselves and see, do I really understand what I'm saying? Can I speak clearly? And to be able to defend and say and affirm what my beliefs are forces me to look within myself. And we want to be like those disciples, I believe it says in the Bible. They knew of what they spoke. And what does that mean, to know of what we speak? It's to have personal experience of what our beliefs are. So let's translate those beliefs from merely rote repetition of perhaps something we read, Master said, therefore it must be so. Well, yeah, that's a good starting place. But if Master said it must be so, we need to take that to the next step and make that truth real for within ourselves, so that when we speak from experienced truth, I have heard it said and I have tested it. And now in that testing, from that testing, I can now testify to the truth of what it is that I believe. And when you know the truth from inner experience, then you speak with power. You speak as somebody confronts you, and you can calmly assert back. And people can feel that. With power, you'll assert back. And people, they can feel that, yes, this person knows what he's saying. But if you come back to another person and you just speak emotionally and dogmatically, it's not going to have any power. The person, you'll just merely confirm in their belief that you are on the wrong path. So you have to confront the foe, confront darkness, but confront it with light. And in our case, that light is the light of inner experience, the light of something we ourselves have been able to testify from our own inner meditation, from our own experience in life. And then you'll find that has power, and the other person can oftentimes be grateful that you spoke up. Because lots of times people, they just speak off the top of their head and they're not really thinking. So give the other person, you might say, a benefit of the doubt, that they're not really meaning to be personally offensive, but they need clarity. And be the one who's willing to give clarity and strength, and standing up for your own principles. You affirm a truth to the larger universe. Darkness exists in this world. We know that. We see it all around us. Somebody needs to be willing to stand up for the light. And I think that's our job. That's our job, not aggressively, but in the appropriate situation where it's called for. Be that. Don't be fearful, because you'll find that when you speak from truth in your heart, realize truth in your heart, not just merely parroting what you read or heard alone, but from your own experience, you find that there's no fear. There's nothing to fear, because there's no doubt, no indecision, because you know what the truth is. And I think as devotees, as disciples, it's our duty and responsibility to share that truth. that, again, going back to those lyrics that Swami shared with Brave of the People, our Lord on mankind did this duty bestow. It's our duty to share truth. It's our duty to share light, but do it in the appropriate way, and personally with a clean heart and a willingness to share and bring clarity to other people and to the situation. So thank you for joining us this evening on Living Wisely, Living Well, and we hope to see you again next week.